Want to turn your drab photos into a more dreamy look in Photoshop? That's what today's video is about. Stay tuned and I'll show you how to do it. Now the image we're working with here is okay, but it's kind of drab and boring. There's not really a lot to draw your focus in. Everything is roughly the same color, same lighting, and it's just kind of flat. So I'm going to show you one of the most important things that you can do when you're trying to make a photo really pop. You want to think in terms of bringing the eye where you want it to go. And I'm going to use light to do it. Hit Ctrl J to duplicate the layer. And then I'm going to right click and convert it to a smart object. Now let's head over to the Camera Raw filter. So filter, Camera Raw. I want to bring the viewer's eye to the subject. One of the best ways to do that is by using light. So I'm going to go into the light settings. I'm first going to turn down the highlights because I don't want those to get overblown, and then turn up the whites. Doing this is going to bring kind of a soft glow to her skin and to her hair. Now I'm going to invert the Smart Filters mask by clicking Ctrl I. And then with a soft white brush, opacity set at 100%, I'm just going to paint the effect in where I want it to be. So on her hair and her skin. And I'm not being too careful here. I don't have to be super exact. I don't mind some light also bleeding over into the areas that are surrounding her as well. I'm also going to paint this effect into her surroundings to create leading lines going from the sun, the flowers, all the way up to my subject. So I'm going to bring that light from the background up to my subject. Again, that's going to help lead the viewer's eye where you want it to go, while at the same time accentuating the natural highlights that would be coming from the sun. To me, it looks like her face and neck are a little bit too warm, so I'm going to create a stamp visible layer by clicking Ctrl-Alt-Shift-E. Again, right click and convert it to a smart object. And then right back to the Camera Raw filter, this time selecting the color section. And I'll just bring down the saturation a bit. That'll help cool down the tones in her skin. And hit OK. Again, I'm going to invert the mask and with a soft round brush, paint that in only on her skin. It's very subtle, but that just brought down some of the oversaturation to a more natural skin tone. I'm going to zoom in and take a look at her eyes. But before I do anything, I want to name my layers just to help me stay organized and remember what everything is. So I'll name this one Skin and Hair. And this one I'll name Face Saturation. Now I'm going to create another Stamp Visible layer, Ctrl-Alt-Shift-E. What this does is it copies everything that we've already done onto this new layer. I'm going to name this layer Eyes, convert it to a smart object, and then again right back into Camera Raw filter. We're going to use the same technique to really make her eyes light up. I'm also going to teach you a trick to make the lighting in the eye look way more natural than what you normally see in these types of edits. So I'm just going to turn up the whites and click OK. I'm going to create a layer mask and invert it. But here's the trick. I'm going to paint this in just on the little highlights in the iris of her eyes. But after that, most people tend to just want to paint this effect on the entire eye. In real life, the eyelid would create a shadow on the top part of the eye. So you don't want that part to be light. So only paint in the parts that you've lightened on the bottom part of the eye. So I'm just brushing with a soft brush over the bottom parts. Now I think that's a little too strong in the whites of her eyes, so I'm going to lower the opacity of my brush just a little, and with a black brush paint some of that lighting off. At this point, I want to group all of my edits that I've done so far, so I'm just going to hold down my Shift key and select each layer, and then hit Ctrl G to group those into one file. I also want to turn the whites up a little bit more on the hair and skin layer. So all I have to do, since I created a smart object out of that, is click back into that layer and then I can make any further adjustments. So I'm just going to turn those whites up a bit more. Now this is already looking great if you just want a very natural, subtle sort of edit, but a lot of people enjoy doing a painterly edit. So from this point forward, I'm going to show you some more techniques where you can get more and more sort of dreamy and that painterly look. But these will also be techniques that you can use in literally any photo. Okay, so I'm going to close the group and give it a name and create a new stamp visible layer by hitting again Control-Alt-Shift-E. That will bring all the edits together into our new layer. And now I'm going to use Photoshop's Generative Fill AI feature to replace the sky. So I'm using my lasso tool and I'm just going to make a general selection around the sky. And then you'll notice the Generative Fill taskbar pops up. So I'll click on Generative Fill and click Generate. And Photoshop's going to use the surrounding pixels to place what it thinks belongs there. You're always given 3 options to choose from. This is option 1, 2, and 3. If I didn't like any of these options, I could just click Generate again and get 3 additional options. But I'm going to stick with option 1 here. Since the eye is always naturally drawn to the lightest areas of an image, and I don't want the viewer's eye to go to the background, I'm going to cover up this white highlighted area. With my brush tool, I'm holding down the Alt key to select a color, and let me show you my settings. In the brush setting under Shape Dynamics, I have the size and angle jitter turned up. This creates randomization. I also have scatter turned up, so this is going to scatter the brush strokes in a random pattern. Under transfer, I've turned up the opacity jitter. That's just going to randomly change the opacity of each of my brush strokes as well. So when I brush, you can see the colors are just scattering randomly in different directions. And every time I hold down the Alt key, that's me selecting a new color for Photoshop to lay down. So I'm getting a very natural look by doing it this way. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this layer. I don't need it anymore, and then create a new group. So this group is for the sky, and I'm just going to come in and do a few more tiny little adjustments. Again, holding down the Alt key to select close by colors, and then just brush it on. I'm seeing a lot of green in her face, so I'm going to create a hue saturation adjustment layer. Click on this little guy to select the tones of her face, and then I'm just going to warm that up a little bit. And lower the opacity. That looks much better. One of the hallmarks of the painterly look, if you want to take it that far, is dodge and burn. So the way I'm going to do that is create 2 curves adjustment layers. The first one I'll name dodge, Control J to copy that, and the second one I'll name burn. I always feel like burn has to be under dodge for some reason, so I pulled that underneath. You certainly don't have to do that. I'm going to do these a little differently than what you might be used to. On the burn layer, I'm going to pull the midtones down quite a lot. Same thing on the dodge layer, only this time I'm going to pull the midtones up quite a lot. Then I'll click Control I to invert each one of the masks. Now on the burn layer, I'm going to select a hard round brush. Make sure all of these settings are cleared from earlier. Now this might look funny at first, but stick with me. With a white brush, I'm going to brush in anywhere there would be shadowy areas. So on top of her forehead, underneath her cheekbones, along the jawline, and on both sides of the bridge of her nose, coming down from the eyebrow. If you're a lady, you know these are the same areas that you might contour with makeup. Same general concept. Then I'm going to put some highlight areas on the dodge layer by just painting in on the mask, again with the white brush. So a little bit on the bottom part of the forehead, down the middle of the nose, under the eye, and on top of the cheekbone to accentuate the cheeks, coming down towards and around the upper lip. And I'm going to do a little dot on her chin and do some highlights on her neck as well. Now from here, I'm going to double click on the dodge layer mask and just turn up the feathering and watch what happens. I'm going to do the same thing on the burn layer. So double click on the mask, turn up the feathering, and look at that. Smooth and natural. So at this point, I'll hold down my Shift key and create a group again. Name my group. Create a mask. And with a black brush, I'm just going to brush off the effect in certain areas. Now I'm also going to use this same technique to create and accentuate some leading lines coming from the sun. So again, I'm going to create another curves adjustment layer. This will be my dodge layer. And I want to take the tones from the sun and just increase the amount of light in certain areas to create, again, those leading lines. Again, bringing those midtones way up. Control I to invert the mask. So with a white brush, I'm just going to paint some leading lines where I want them to go. And then again, double click on the mask and increase the feather. And that's going to create a nice, soft glow of light leading up to my subject. I want to warm up that glow of light I just created a little bit, so I'm going to use a curves adjustment layer to do it. I'll select the reds from the drop down and just increase the midtones in the reds. That'll warm that area up. Now I want to show you one last cool trick to use. I'm actually going to create dappled lighting throughout the image using my brush settings. So to do this, I'll create a new layer, and with a white brush, I'm going to go into my settings and reselect shape dynamics, increase my size jitter, angle jitter, and randomness jitter. I'm also going to select scattering, increase my scattering, as well as opacity jitter, and I'm going to bump up the brush rotation a bit as well. This is going to create randomness in the light. Now I'll just click, and right there I've created what looks like the light catching some of the flower petals. I'm going to continue to just click and drag anywhere I want the light to catch. Now I'm going to change my blending mode to overlay, and look at what a difference that makes. This goes a long way in creating that soft, dreamy, painterly look. So let's take a step back for a before and after.